Welcome everyone to CASLPO's webinar on CASLPO registration, the CETP exam, and mentorship. So we'd like to start with a bit of housekeeping. So close other running applications to maintain a stable audio and video connection. If your connection freezes, please exit GoToWebinar and then return to the session. The video and slides for this presentation will be posted on CASLPO's website. To obtain them, you will have to visit Applicants, then Apply to the College in the menu on the left, and then Internationally Educated Applicants. You may enter questions in the questions section of GoToWebinar at any time during the presentation. We will answer questions at the end of the section about registration with CASLPO and again after the section about mentorship. If you don't have time, or if we don't have time to answer all the questions received during the presentation, we will answer questions in our FAQs after the presentation, and we will notify webinar participants when the new FAQs are available. Oops, sorry. The agenda will include a 5-minute bio break before we start the mentorship section of our presentation. And so our presenters today is, of course, myself, Colleen Myrie. I'm the Director of Registration Services. And Jennifer?
Hi, my name is Jennifer Cupid. I am the International Applications Coordinator.
And Samita?
Hi, everybody. I'm Samita Joglekar. I'm the Audiology Advisor and Manager of Mentorship.
And also on the line, we have Jessica Laforette. She is our registration program assistant, and she will be monitoring your questions and moderating that. So here is our agenda today. We'll be talking about what is CASLPO, CASLPO's Registration Regulation Amendment, and the Canadian Entry to Practice exam. The acronym is CETP exam, and for the professions of audiology and speech-language pathology. We'll also be looking at good character and what that means in respect to registration with CASLPO. Becoming a CASLPO registrant, both the application and the registration process, and also CASLPO's mentorship program. Oops. So what is the College of Audiologists and Speech-Language Pathologists of Ontario, also known as CASLPO? So for many professions in Canada, regulatory bodies are called colleges. So a regulatory college is not an academic institution. CASLPO is the regulatory body for audiologists and speech-language pathologists in the province of Ontario. So what is a regulatory body? So the role of a regulatory body is to protect the public interest. We set requirements to enter the profession. We establish and enforce standards of professional practice and conduct. We assure the quality of practice of the profession and also continuing competence of practicing members. We also investigate complaints about from clients or the public and take disciplinary action when necessary. Oops, sorry. So to work in Ontario as an audiologist or speech-language pathologist, you must be registered with CASLPO. Audiology and speech-language pathology and other regulated health professions are self-regulated in Ontario. So what is self-regulation? In self-regulation, the duty to regulate rests on the professionals who are practicing their profession in Ontario. So CASLPO has a council, and the council is CASLPO's governing body. And its role is to serve the public interest by overseeing the regulation of the practice of audiology, or the practice of audiologists and speech language pathologists. So the council is also there to establish CASLPO's strategic direction and to the outcomes that lead to self-regulation moving forward in the public interest. So CASLPO's council is composed of 9 elected professional registrants, 2 registrants from the university community, and up to 7 public members appointed by the provincial government. So for healthcare professionals in Ontario, self-regulation is a privilege, not a right. When you register with CASLPO, you are joining the company of all other regulated professionals in the province. That includes nurses, teachers, doctors, lawyers, engineers, and of course, there are many other regulated health professions. So we'd just like to outline some of the differences between a regulator and an association or professional association. So there are, a regulator will act in the interest of the public. That is our main purpose. And an association acts in the interest of the profession. A regulator is governed by a council composed of elected professional registrants, government-appointed public members, and also academics. A association is governed by a board of directors composed of professionals. A regulator registration is based on legislated criteria, whereas an association accepts members based on an association determined criteria. With regulator, registration is mandatory, whereas with the professional association, membership is voluntary. Also with the regulator, the regulator is accountable to the public, to the government, and to their registrants, whereas with an association, they're accountable to their members. We have some other distinctions between a regulator and professional associations. These are just the highlights of them. We've provided a link so that if you want to download the slides later, you can look at that document and see the differences, the other differences between a regulator and a professional association. So CASLPO also provides a number of services. Of course, registration is one of them, looking at new applications, mentorship, and also renewal of registrations. We also have a quality assurance program, which includes our self-assessment tool, which is called the SAT, and continuous learning activity credits, which are known as CLACs, and peer assessment. We have inquiries, reports, complaints, and a discipline process, professional practice advice, and also we do e-forums, webinars, other communications, and of course, public awareness. So an important thing to note about regulation of professionals in Ontario, it is registration with the regulatory body, like CASLPO, and not your university degree in audiology or speech language pathology that gives you the legal authority to use the professional title, such as audiologist, speech language pathologist, speech therapist, or any abbreviation or variation of these titles in Ontario, and to make any representation to the public that an individual is qualified to practice audiology or speech language pathology in Ontario. So CASLPO has 4 different certificates of registration or licenses that we offer. One is the general license. We have an initial license. We have a non-practicing license and also an academic license. So the 2, I guess, most used certificates are the ones that would be applicable to most of the people listening to the webinar today are the general certificate or the initial certificate. So we just wanted to outline the differences between the 2. And so with the general certificate, the applicant will have met all of the academic requirements for registration. They will also have provided at least 750 hours of patient care or related work in the previous 3 years before applying for this certificate. And they have also successfully passed the CETP exam. With the initial certificate, the applicant has met the academic requirements, but may not have completed 750 hours worth of patient care or related work in the 3 years before applying. So they could be a new graduate or somebody who just hasn't worked recently. And they may not have yet passed the CETP exam, but we can issue that initial certificate so they can start their mentorship if the applicant has an offer of employment to work in Ontario as an audiologist or speech language pathologist and is practicing under the mentorship of a general registrant of CASLPO that has at least 6 months or the mentorship will be for at least 6 months. So throughout our presentation, we will be presenting a few scenarios, and we would like you to participate in our polling that we have. And so this is our first scenario. We have Mia, who has completed her master's degree program in speech language pathology at University X and plans to work in Ontario, but she is not a registrant of CASLPO yet. So Mia decides to create the following LinkedIn profile. So it says Mia Jones, speech language pathologist, pre-registered, Ottawa, Canada area. And in summary, it says, I am a pre-registered speech language pathologist based in Ontario, and I have excellent communication skills and pride myself on my ability to develop a rapport with clients and their families. So is the information on Mia's LinkedIn profile acceptable according to college regulations?
I'm just going to launch the poll.
So you see your options are either yes, no, or unsure.
So just give a few moments for people to respond. Just a few responses have come through. If anybody else watching would like to participate in the poll, go ahead. Yeah, okay, got more responses coming through now. All right, I'll close the poll and share the results. As you can see, 15% have said yes, it's okay what she has on her profile, 67% have said no, and 18% are unsure.
So what we want to point out is that her profile does not meet the requirements of the college. The first being that she is in Ontario, and she is using the protected title, speech language pathologist, before she has obtained registration with the college. By putting pre-registered with it, it does not, it just becomes a variation of the professional title, which is still a no-no. So again, you can see where she identifies herself as a pre-registered speech language pathologist. She is definitely what we call holding herself out as qualified. And again, that is something that you cannot do before you are actually issued registration with the college. So our next topic is CASLPO's Registration Regulation Amendment and the CETP exams for the professions of audiology and speech language pathology. So the college must assess applications in accordance with the requirements outlined in Ontario Regulation 2112. So these requirements are laws. When a requirement is listed as non-exemptable, it means that this requirement must be applied as written. So this also means that CASLPO's registrar, college staff, and the college's registration committee do not have the authority to waive a non-exemptable requirement. So on March 12th of this year, the amendments to CASLPO's registration regulation were approved by Ontario's government. And if you want to have a look at these, this new regulation, we've provided the link. So one of the amendments to the regulation was the introduction of the CETP exams for audiology and SLP as a non-exemptable registration requirement. So the CETP exams for audiology and speech language pathology are competency-based examinations. They aim to test the recall of relevant knowledge, but more importantly, the clinical application of that knowledge and critical thinking. The Speech Language and Audiology Canada, known as SAC, is responsible for the administration of the CETP exams for audiology and speech language pathology. So they have previously administered the national certification exams for many decades. The CETP exam is a new exam for regulators, and but if you go to SAC's website, we've provided a link, you can get more information about the exam. We just want to say that SAC has partnered with test developer and deliverer Yardstick to ensure a reliable and valid exam process based on psychometric standards. The CETP exams are based on the national competency profiles for the professions of audiology and speech language pathology, and those were developed by professional subject matter experts working with Canadian regulatory bodies, and were reviewed by working clinicians and academics across Canada. So I just wanted to show you what SAC's website looks like, and this is the spot where they have all of their exam information. So in the registration process, SAC has a role and CASLPO has a very different role. So we just kind of wanted to provide you with the differences between those two roles. So related to the CETP exams for audiology and speech language pathology, SAC administers the CETP exam. Whereas CASLPO, we issue the license for individuals to practice audiology and speech language pathology in the province of Ontario. So while the exam is something that you need to pass in order to get your license or to maintain your license, if you want information on how the exam works and the content and writing the exam, preparing for the exam, and what happens after the exam, you can find all of that information on SAC's website. If you need information about applying to the college, the application timelines and fees associated with the registration, our mentorship program, even about studying outside of Canada, you can get that information on the CASLPO website. So CASLPO's registrar may issue an initial certificate to an applicant prior to their writing the SAC exams for audiology and speech language pathology. The applicant must sign an agreement to write their profession's CETP exam during the 6-month term of their initial certificate of registration. This agreement is known as an undertaking. So in the undertaking, the applicant is agreeing to take their profession's CETP exam during the 6-month term of their initial certificate of registration and to stop practicing within 30 days if they fail the CETP exam while holding an initial certificate. If an individual has failed the exam, they may be required to reapply for registration with CASLPO once they have passed their profession's CETP exam. And depending on their situation, the continuing of mentorship may or may not be required. So if you are applying to Ontario for registration, you must obtain information about registration in Ontario from CASLPO's website and information about the CETP exams for audiology or speech language pathology from the SAC website. So this is a note that there is an organization, it's the Canadian Alliance of Audiology and Speech Language Pathology Regulators. The acronym is CASPR. Their website, we recommend that you don't go there for information about registration in Ontario. So if you are applying for registration in another province in Canada or are practicing in a territory, we recommend that you go to that province's regulatory body for information about practice. In the territories, they are unregulated jurisdictions as well as PEI. So if you're going to those jurisdictions, there wouldn't be a regulator to contact. So we go into our next topic, which is about good character. So what is it? So good character is actually defined in CASLPO's registration regulation. Under point 6, it says the applicant's past and present conduct must afford reasonable grounds for the belief that the applicant does not have a physical or mental condition or disorder that may affect his or her ability to practice the profession in a safe manner, will practice the profession with decency, integrity, and honesty in accordance with the law, and will display an appropriate professional attitude. So we have another scenario that we would like to just discuss with you or bring about to your attention. There was a group of male dentistry students at Dalhousie University in Canada, and they had posted some sexually violent comments about female classmates on the group's Facebook page. So the content of the group's Facebook page became public, and the university suspended the 13 students who were members of the group. So what should a regulatory body's registration committee do if they receive an application from one of these students? So the options available to the registration committee are they can issue a certificate of registration. They can issue a certificate of registration if the applicant successfully completes additional training specified by the panel, like sexual harassment awareness or prevention training. They can refuse to issue a certificate of registration, and none of the above. So basically, the misconduct does not necessarily bar an applicant from registration, but it does trigger an inquiry into the applicant's suitability to practice. So each applicant would be assessed by the registration committee on a case-by-case basis. And the committee would want to know what the applicant's conduct was and the details of the conduct before a decision can be made about registration with the college. So our next topic is registration with the college, and I'm going to hand things over to Jennifer Cupid.
Thank you, Colleen. So I will continue from this point. And hello again, my name is Jennifer Cupid. As I said earlier, I'm the International Applications Coordinator, and I may have already been in contact with some of you, and others of you we may be in contact in the next few months. So I will talk about registration with CASLPO, the application process, the registration process, and get into some of the details about the process and what is required. So the applications, broadly speaking, for CASLPO registration are the completion of a professional master's degree in audiology or speech-language pathology. Included in this is the fulfillment of academic requirements that are more specific about coursework and clinical practicum content and hours. The good character requirement must be fulfilled that Colleen was just talking about, and language proficiency must be demonstrated. So the application process itself, I'll sort of broadly talk about the steps to it. The first step is for you to submit documents to CASLPO. And this process is both for registration with CASLPO and to demonstrate eligibility for the CTP enrollment that is with SAC. But you first must show that you're eligible for the CTP exam through us. The next step is once we've received your application form, you're going to hear from us within about 3 weeks. And this is regarding any documents that might be missing from your application package. And then once we've received all of your documents, we will then put your application in a queue for the review. And you will receive from us at that point a ready for review email, and then you're put in the queue. And then the next step is the actual review by CASLPO staff, and that is generally completed within about 10 weeks from the time you receive the ready for review email. And then if it's deemed that you're eligible for registration, then you can enroll for the CETP exam with SAC, and we send your name to SAC saying that you're eligible. And you can register with CASLPO with proof of exam enrollment, or if you've already written the exam, successful exam result. And if you're applying for an initial certificate, then you must show an offer of employment and information about a mentor. Again, if it's initial certificate, we'll go through those final details again. So where do you start? Some of you may have already started and some of you are yet to start. So once you've completed your professional master's degree in audiology or speech pathology, and a professional master's degree is one that has coursework, clinical practicum, and research component. So then you must submit to us the following items. The first is a completed application form. You find that on our website for international and non-accredited Canadian programs. So if you go to our website, and this is what it looks like when you write CASLPO.com, on the right-hand side, you'll see an applicants section. So if you click on that, then there'll be a bar on the left, and you click on apply to the college. And then a drop-down menu will happen, and that you click on the internationally educated applicants, and down you will see a green box that says download application, and that's where you find the application. And also there is a lot of information that is useful on this first page, so please do read that as well. You also need to submit an application fee of $150. And I will say, because this has been a question we've received in the past, you can submit your documents to us in any order. Once we receive your first document, we create a file for you essentially. So it doesn't matter the order that these are submitted in. I'm just going by the order on the checklist in our application form. So we also need official transcripts from both your graduate and undergraduate programs, and we require it to be an official transcript sent directly from the university. We need a completed coursework requirements form, and I'm going to go into more detail about this form. There are 4 coursework areas of study, and there are 5 sections on this form. So the first section is basic communication processes. Second section is related areas. The third section is the major professional area, and that if you're an applicant, if you're applying to be an audiologist, then that is the major professional area is audiology. If you're applying to be a speech pathologist, the major professional area is speech pathology. Section 4 is the minor professional area, and that's the opposite of the two. So if you're applying to be an audiologist, then the minor area for you is speech pathology, and if you're applying to be a speech pathologist, the minor area is audiology. And then section 5 is the content areas, and this looks deeper into the coursework in the major professional area. So here is what the form looks like. And on the right side of the page, I have examples of courses that you can include in each of the subsections. And each subsection on this coursework form must show coursework. So the first section, anatomic and physiological basis for normal development. Examples are human anatomy, physiology and physiology of speech mechanisms. It could be just an anatomy course. So any of those courses can fit in here. The second section is the physical basis and processes of the production and perception of speech, and phonetics courses, phonology courses, acoustics courses, psychoacoustics, all those courses can fit in there. The third section is perceptual processes and psycholinguistic variables, and in this section it's generally linguistics courses, so introduction to linguistics, semantics, phonology, syntax, psycholinguistics, those courses can all fit into this section. Section 2 in the related areas, we have 3 subsections again. The first is the study of human behavior, and so courses like Introduction to Psychology, Abnormal Psychology, Sociology, Child Development, those courses can fit in here. The next section is essentially statistics, research methods, more in-depth statistics courses fit in here as well. And the third section is administrative organization of speech language pathology and or audiology programs. And this is generally courses from your master's degree, including professional issues, professional practice, those types of courses that you will find, the organization of speech pathology services in that jurisdiction, those types of courses. Okay, and I will say these first 2 sections of coursework, These courses are often brought in from your undergraduate degree, so that is why we need to have a copy of your undergraduate transcript. Okay, section 3 is primarily taken from your master's degree. And again, if you're an audiology applicant, then this is all your audiology courses. If you're a speech pathology applicant, this is a list of all your speech pathology courses. And as I said before, the minor professional area is the opposite profession. So if you're a speech pathology applicant, your audiology courses fit here. And if you're an audiology applicant, your speech pathology courses fit here. And here is the section 5, the content areas. So this is where we look in depth to make sure that you fulfilled the specific content areas in your degree. So this is for the audiology applicants. Speech pathology applicants don't need to submit this form. And what I've done, so you just have to, here's the content area in the left column. The middle column says course syllabus or syllabi or attached letters from professor. And here what we want you to do is say, in this middle column, we want you to tell us which course you covered this material in. So like pediatric audiology, oopsies, sorry about that. Pediatric audiology, I want you to write down which course this was covered in. Often it's covered in a course called pediatric audiology. So give me the course number, the course name, and then in the right-hand column, page numbers. And this is to make the process go faster. If you can tell us, show us where we can find this content area, it's much better than us looking through all of your syllabi. So if we look at calibration and maintenance of instrumentation, let's say that's covered in a course called Basic Electronics, then you write that name in the middle column and page number, you write which page of the syllabus you found it in. And this really just makes it much easier for us to get through finding that you've completed these content areas. I have highlighted the advanced amplification section for audiology applicants. We need to see that each of these terms, each of these 5 terms was covered in your program. So please do look for these terms in your syllabi. If you don't find these, but you know that these content areas were all covered in your program, what you can do is request a letter from a professor saying, this student or this applicant did complete this or did cover this material in their program in this course, name the course, and if they provide a syllabus which shows it or any information that documents that these content areas were covered is really helpful for us. If we don't find the specific information in reviewing your syllabi, or it's not clear where it is, then we will just have to email you and let you and ask you for more documentation about it. Okay, and here is the same page for speech pathology applicants with the different content areas that need to be covered. Okay, and how do you calculate the coursework hours? So if we go back, I'm just going to go back to here. Let's say in this course we need 45 coursework hours in the minor professional area. So for most courses which have a regular schedule, you count the number of hours of lectures, tutorials, labs per week, and the number of weeks in the semester. And that tells you how many hours were in the course. And I will note here, and it's included in the application guide, lecture tutorial hours are counted at 100%, and laboratory or problem-based learning hours, if your program is a problem-based learning program, they're counted at 30%. And the more information is in the guide about this, so it can help you with the math. So generally the hours in a course, it's contained in your syllabus and also sometimes on your transcript that you provide to us. If you find that that information is not there, you will need to provide the information in a different way, and you can ask a professor who taught the course to write a letter about how many lecture hours and tutorial lab hours were in the course, and that is sufficient as well. Okay, and the next thing is a signed CASLPO summary of clinical practicum hours form. So this is part of our application guide, this form. And either your program director or clinical coordinator or some designate of your program must sign and verify the form that details all the supervised clinical practicum hours that you completed. And we do need this to be an original form with an original signature. Okay, we need an academic credential assessment report for each degree that was obtained outside of Canada. So if you did your undergraduate degree in Canada, we don't need an academic credential assessment. You can just send us directly the undergraduate transcript. In our guide, we have the 3 organizations who will do this type of assessment listed, and they are WES. And for WES, we require it to be a document by document or course by course evaluation. IQOS, we require the basic assessment, and University of Toronto CES, they provide only 1 type. The report must be sent to the college, and again, it has to be an original report. And just a little note that if you do use WES for the academic credential assessment, you don't need to submit an additional transcript to us because they will verify it and send it to us. So, syllabi, we require a syllabus for each course that you have included on your coursework form, and that's just so that we can verify and confirm the hours you've indicated. If you have already practiced or were a regulated professional in another jurisdiction, we require a completed verification of registration or licensure form. And it's required from each jurisdiction where you are or were previously registered or licensed. And we don't require letters, in this case, from associations, just from regulatory bodies or licensing boards. And we require evidence of proficiency in English or French. And if the language of instruction of your professional master's degree was not English or French, then you must submit to us a test result. If your professional master's program was in English or French, then that is sufficient evidence for us. Okay, so of all those documents, the following must be originals. One is the university transcripts, and it's either sent in a university sealed envelope, or if your university provides official e-transcripts that are password protected, that is fine. We require that the academic credential assessment be an original. If you've already had an academic credential assessment done and it is the type that we indicated is required, that can be sent to us provided that it is an original. And your clinical practicum hours form must also be an original. Your professor may email it directly to us with a university email. That is possible, or the paper form can be submitted. Okay, so how long does the process take? So once we receive your application form, it will take us about 3 weeks for us to complete the intake process. And once the intake process has been done, we'll send you an email to let you know which documents have been received and if any are still outstanding. And then once we've received all of your documents, then we'll send you a ready for review email and let you know that your application is in the queue for the review. And then the review of your application, or the registration eligibility review, may take up to 10 weeks to complete. And that's from the date of the ready for review emails received by you. Unless there's an issue identified. If we require more documentation, then it will take longer because we'll have to go back and forth and get that documentation. But generally, it's about 10 weeks. And then if you're eligible, then you may register with CASLPO, and we will confirm your CETP eligibility with SAC at that point. Okay, and in our review process, we are committed to processing applications as quickly as possible and in the order that each application is received in completed form. So please resist the temptation of calling the college to check on the status of your application because it does slow down our processing, and we won't be able to give you any more information than what you got when you got your email about, yes, we've received everything, you're in the queue. We will contact you as soon as we have reached a new step in your process. So here is a scenario. We're continuing with Mia. She's now sending in her application, but she's concerned that her courier company didn't send it properly. So should Mia contact the college to confirm the receipt of her application? And we will switch to a poll.
Yes.
Okay.
So we've got people putting in their responses. Okay, I'm going to close the poll and share the results with you.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay, that's great. There we go. So should she contact us to confirm that we've received your application, we ask that you not contact us. Once we've received your application form, you will hear from us within 3 weeks, indicating which documents we've received and which remain outstanding. So we will give you all the information we have about your application. And until that point, we won't be able to provide you with any meaningful information. Okay, and we are still experiencing this COVID-19 pandemic. And during this time, we are operating a virtual office, which you can probably tell. At this time, there are no walk-in visits being accepted at the college. And we are still providing all of our services. And with these disruptions, things are slightly different. There may be processing timelines that may require adjustments during this period. So we appreciate your patience with us. So we have a new scenario about the application process. So Mia, she calls Jessica Laferette at CASLPO and says to her, I have been offered my dream job and the employer says I need to start in 2 weeks. I'm just about to submit my application to CASLPO, but if I'm not registered in 2 weeks, I'm going to lose this job opportunity. So should CASLPO push this file to the top of the queue so that Mia may start her employment in time? And we'll move to another poll. Okay.
Just waiting a few more seconds for people to participate.
Okay, great.
All right. Closing and sharing the results.
Okay, so most people have said no to the question, should CASLPO push this file to the top of the queue? And again, we have to say no. We cannot move an application ahead of other people's applications, even in this situation. CASLPO, we answer to the Office of the Fairness Commissioner of Ontario, and we must provide an impartial, transparent, and fair process for all of the applicants. If we were to advance Mia's file because of this dream job opportunity, it's unfair to others who submitted their applications and are also waiting to start their dream jobs. And so we can't move someone ahead of others in the queue because it's just not fair. And then again, these scenarios may be pulled from reality. Mia's potential employer calls Jessica Laferette at CASLPO and says, I would like to hire this graduating student for a position we have. We need her to start in 2 weeks, otherwise the children at our center will not get the service that they are entitled to. So in this case, should CASLPO push this file to the top of the queue so that Mia can start on time in 2 weeks? And we'll try another poll. Okay. If there's any more responses.
All right, if anybody would like to still participate in the poll, please go ahead. And we're going to close it now and share the results.
Okay, so again, most of you say no, we can't push this one to the top of the queue. And that's correct. We cannot move this application ahead of others. And it's for the same reasons. We have to provide an impartial, transparent, and fair process for all applicants and indeed for all citizens in Ontario. If we were to advance Mia's file because of the children at that one particular center, it's unfair to other applicants who submitted their applications, and they may also have patients who are waiting for service. So We can't adjudicate this. That is up to the employers to determine their timelines, and we have our timelines. So once the college has confirmed in an email that the application is complete, applications are then placed in a queue and we can't deviate from that order. So what to do? Plan ahead. And when you're speaking with potential employers about a job offer, make sure that they are aware of the application timeline and the registration processes. It is not possible for us to expedite any applications that we receive. Okay, so generally the application process, a completed application is reviewed by college staff to determine if all the college's registration requirements have been met. And if your applications are approved, you'll be notified by email that you are now eligible for registration with the college. In some cases, there may be deficiencies in an application. And if there are one or more deficiencies in your application, either in coursework, clinical practicum hours, or good character, then your application will go further review by CASLPO's registration committee. This committee meets quarterly through the year, so that there will be an increase in your application time by generally 3 to 6 months for the whole process until you find the results of the review. And then the registration committee, after they've met, they may conclude that there are no deficiencies in your application, in which case they would direct the registrar to issue a certificate to the applicant. They may find that there are deficiencies and confirm them, in which case they would direct the registrar to issue a certificate of registration if the applicant successfully completes additional training as specified by the panel, or possibly an extra examination. There may be other concerns, and in which case they could direct the registrar to impose specific terms, conditions, limitations on a certificate of registration to the applicant. And in some cases, registration must be denied, and they will direct the registrar to refuse to issue a certificate of registration. And so again, if there is additional training required, additional coursework required, that will increase the time until, that could increase the time until you're able to be registered. So things to keep in mind. And one final note about contact with the college. For confidentiality reasons, we can't speak to anyone other than the applicant about an application without the applicant's permission. And misunderstood or distorted information by a third party who might not be as familiar with the professions, that could lead to delays or errors in your application. And if there's errors in your application, then it will extend the time your application takes to be reviewed. So please make sure that it's you contacting us rather than your parent, spouse, or employer. Okay, so once the application review is completed, and you're eligible for registration, you move to the registration process. So it begins once it's a successful application process. And at this point, you will receive a registration form from CASLPO's program assistant after you've been deemed eligible. So, and just a note that if you're applying for an initial certificate, in order to complete the registration process to become an initial registrant, you must have an offer of employment in Ontario to work as an audiologist or speech pathologist, and you must have an eligible mentor lined up. And this will be mentorship, of course, will be talked about more with Samita. Okay, so for completing the registration process, these are the items that must be submitted. A completed registration form, and all your registration documents must be received by CASLPO at least 5 business days ahead of your start date. So if you know that you intend to get started next Tuesday, you've got to make sure that you submit it at least 5 business days ahead of the start date. For an initial certificate, you must provide your mentor's name, and you must show us either proof of a successful CETP exam result, which is required for a general certificate, or if you're applying for an initial certificate, enrollment in the CETP exam for your profession. And this is at the registration phase. And if the enrollment period for the next CETP exam has not yet begun when you get your registration form, let us know and we'll provide you with directions for providing an acceptable alternative. As Colleen mentioned, if you have not yet completed the CETP exam, you need to submit a signed undertaking. And you must tell us your employment start date, and this date refers to the date you expect to begin working as an audiologist or working as a speech pathologist in Ontario. If you don't know what the date will be, then it's okay to indicate pending completion of registration with CASLPO. We also need to know your employment information, which is information related to your practice location. And we need your direct report or manager's contact information, including name and email address. You must show that you have professional liability insurance coverage, including the carrier name, policy certificate, number, and expiry date, and the coverage required is $2 million per claim. Also, we need a document providing proof of eligibility to work in Canada, and that could be either Canadian citizenship, birth certificate, passport, a permanent residence, or sorry, citizenship card, your permanent residence status, or your Canadian employment authorization, which is a work permit, a valid Canadian work permit. We also require documentation regarding your professional experience if you're going to get a general certificate. And we require a registration fee of $50, and along with a prorated annual fee payment. The annual fee for an audiologist or speech pathologist is prorated quarterly for the registration year, which goes from October 1st to September 30th. And there's a fees chart on our website. And I will note these slides will be available in addition to a recording of the webinar. We'll put the slides on the website so you can access these links that we've provided. Okay, so as I mentioned, the registration processing timeline, once we've received all of your documents, it'll take up to 5 business days to issue the certificate of registration. And then congratulations, you are registered in the province of Ontario. And just a note about registration renewal, all certificates of registration with CASLPO must be renewed on or before October 1st of each year. Okay, here's a few frequently asked questions that we do get, and we do have frequently asked questions that I'll show you on our website. Mia has asked, can she start working as an audiologist or speech language pathologist once she submits an application to CASLPO? So we will do a poll on this. Samita?
Yes, the poll has been launched.
Excellent. So can she start working as an audiologist or speech pathologist once she submits an application to CASLPO?
I'll just give a few more seconds for the attendees to respond.
Okay.
Okay, we're closing and sharing the results.
Okay, so the answer is no. Colleen mentioned before, it is registration with CASLPO that legally gives you the right to work, hold yourself out, use the title, or work as an audiologist or speech pathologist. So you cannot work as an audiologist or speech pathologist until after you've been issued your certificate of registration by CASLPO. And here on our website, if you go to the applicant section again, and to the internationally educated applicants on the left side, you see up here we have FAQs, and this is a combination of all very commonly asked questions we get about the application process for applicants from internationally and non-accredited Canadian programs. Okay, if you're looking for the latest CETP information, and it's really information relative to registration with CASLPO, again, in the applicants section on the left side, below apply to the college, we have a page devoted to information about the CETP exam. Okay, any questions? Maybe we'll bring Colleen back.
Yes, there are some questions. The first one I have for you, Jennifer, is, or Colleen, how do I provide proof of 750 hours of patient care / related work? Is this submitted with my application or at registration?
The 750 hours, it is a declaration that you make rather than having to provide evidence. And what we, that is actually based on an honor system. However, any statements you make during your registration with the college, if we get information after you become a member that you provided misinformation or lied on the application, that could be a case for professional misconduct. So the information that you declare has to be truthful and accurate at the time that you're making those declarations in the application process.
Thank you, Colleen. My next question here is...
Sorry, Jennifer has something to add to that as well.
Yes.
Yes, I was just going to say you do submit. I don't think you said this, Colleen, but I could be wrong.
Oh no, I
you
did
do.
not.
Okay, you have your previous employer submit to us. I think it's a reference request form that's in the application guide. I believe it's in the application. Anyway, a reference request form gets submitted to us, and your employer will sign it.
Okay, just to clarify, the Form D is sent to you with your registration form. So when you become registered, you will, if you are eligible for a general certificate, you will receive a Form D with your registration form. The next question I had was, if you don't cover enough hours to meet the minor course requirements as part of your UK Master's program, can you take an additional course at a Canadian university to enable you to meet the requirements? If so, should you do this in advance of making the application or apply to CASLPO and take guidance from them as to which courses you should do?
Okay, so there are a few questions in there. If you're missing any, so let's say you're missing the minor hours, should you take it ahead of time? It depends on your level of confidence. If you're missing, if you have 0 hours in the minor area, it's a tricky thing. Essentially, if you are missing 45 hours and you have 0 hours, then you can take a course on your own. Like if you're a speech pathology applicant, you can take an intro to audiology course during your program or anytime and submit that, and that will be counted towards your degree. You don't have to have taken the courses at your professional master's university. It's only tricky if you take a course on your own and it duplicates coursework you've already done, then those extra hours would not be counted. That's the only reason I'm a bit iffy on it. But if you haven't taken any coursework hours and you take a course that you know you haven't taken those hours already, then those hours will be counted at if they're at a university. If there is a deficiency, if you don't take the hours and you wait for us to tell you, which is totally fine, it will add, if there's any deficiency in your application, it will add time to the application time.
Wonderful, thank you, Jennifer. Do we have time for one more question? It's a quick one.
I think so.
Okay, so my next question is, I have a bachelor's and master's degree in speech language pathology and audiology. Do I have to fill the coursework forms for each degree separately?
Good question. No, you don't. You can, on each subsection, just put the courses from both of your degrees wherever they fit. You don't have to fill out the same form twice. You can put all the courses into one form. If you run out of room, you can put it on the back of the paper or another page, but you don't have to fill it out twice.
But to clarify, if you are wishing to apply as a speech language pathologist and an audiologist, you have to complete 2 separate forms.
2 separate applications. If you want to apply,
yes.
If you want to apply as an audiologist and you want to apply as a speech pathologist, those are 2 completely separate applications.
Yes.
But if you're applying to be a speech pathologist and you have a bachelor's degree with courses and a master's degree with courses, all the courses can go onto one form.
Perfect. So any other questions that I have received, we will hopefully have time for at the end. If not, we will answer them individually at a later date within a couple of weeks. Thanks, guys.
Okay, so I guess we are going to allow you a 5-minute bio break at this stage, and when you come back, we will be talking about mentorship. Thank you, everyone.
Good afternoon, everybody. So welcome back. Hopefully you had a chance to have a quick break, have some water, use the washroom, whatever you had to do. And we're back now. I'm Samita Joglekar. I am the Audiology Advisor and Manager of the Mentorship Program. And I'm going to spend this time now telling you about CASLPO's Mentorship Program. So let's begin with why CASLPO has a mentorship program. Well, there are a few reasons. Firstly, mentorship is a condition of an initial certificate of registration. So it is in the registration regulation that if you have an initial certificate, you must be mentored and you must complete a mentorship. So it's a requirement that has to be followed. Another reason is because the mentorship period introduces you to CASLPO's quality assurance program through an online assessment tool and a process of practice evaluation. So as you'll see later in the presentation, the mentorship is all about learning about the practice standards and making sure that you're meeting these practice standards. So that kind of ties into the last reason here, which is that mentorship is one way that CASLPO protects the public. So mentorship is a way for the college to make sure that you understand what the practice standards are and that you're meeting those standards in your practice. And by making sure that you meet the standards, we know that then the public is going to receive quality service. So let's go through the basics of mentorship. So the mentorship period is a minimum of 6 months for everyone. During that 6-month period, you have to provide a minimum of 500 hours of patient care. And during that 6-month period, your mentor must provide at least 48 hours of guidance. And this guidance can be direct or indirect. So direct would be you're sitting in the same room with your mentor having a conversation about your practice. And indirect would be a telephone conversation or comments in the mentorship tool that I'm going to show you later on, or emails or phone calls between you and your mentor. We want this guidance from your mentor to be spread evenly over the 6 months. So we don't want you to do 6 days back to back, 8 hours a day. We want you to receive guidance. We recommend 2 hours per week from your mentor. And some direct observation of your practice from your mentor is mandatory during the mentorship period. So more about the basics. During mentorship, you and your mentor will complete the Mentorship Self-Assessment tool, and we call that the MSAT. And you'll be completing this tool over the course of the 6 months. So in the MSAT, it includes your own assessment of how you meet CASLPO practice standards. You're able to put evidence into the tool and enter comments to show or explain how you meet the standards. And later on, I'll show you some screenshots of the MSAT, so that'll be more clear to you how that works. You'll also be completing the clinical reasoning tool at the midterm time point, and that tool is included in the MSAT. And you'll be doing learning goals. And your mentor also assesses you on how you are meeting standards and will submit a midterm and a final report to the college using the MSAT. So we get a lot of questions about extending the mentorship. And whether or not you can extend your mentorship will depend on a few different factors. And one of those factors is whether you start your mentorship after you've already passed the Canadian Entry to Practice exam or the CETP exam, or if you start your mentorship before you've passed that exam. So if you start mentorship after you've passed the CETP exam, then your mentorship period can be extended when you send a formal extension request and when that request is approved by CASLPO. So we review those extension requests and then we give extensions at 3-month intervals. It's important for you to know that your mentorship period cannot be longer or it cannot exceed 24 months from the date of your initial CASLPO registration. So we can only extend within a 2-year period. We can't extend after that. If you start mentorship before you've passed the CETP exam, then what will happen is your mentorship period will be extended to allow you to enroll in the next exam and receive your exam results. If you pass the exam and then need more time to complete the mentorship, then you can send in a request, and that request would need to be approved, and the extension could then be applied. If you don't pass the CETP exam, then as Colleen described in the first part of this presentation, you can't continue with your mentorship because you have to stop practicing if you don't pass the exam. So in that case, you must transfer your patients to another audiologist or speech language pathologist and stop practicing within 30 days. You need to inform your mentor that you're required to stop practicing, and then your mentorship will be on hold until you have passed the exam and until your registration with CASLPO has been reinstated. So you might be wondering, if this happens, then how will I resume my mentorship? Well, depending on the progress of your mentorship, CASLPO will determine how you can resume after your initial certificate has been reinstated. So if it's confirmed that your mentorship period was progressing well, you may be able to resume where you left off with the same mentor or maybe a new mentor. If your mentorship period for some reason was not progressing well, then CASLPO staff, that would probably be me, I would contact you about beginning your mentorship again. So let's spend some time talking about mentorship versus supervision, because many times people think that mentorship and supervision are the same thing. But for CASLPO, mentorship is not supervision. Okay, mentorship is something different. So let's talk about what mentorship is. So during mentorship, an initial registrant, and that would possibly be you, is accountable for their clinical work and decisions. So what does it mean to be accountable? And this is a difference in mentorship, is that you are accountable for the work that you do. You're not being supervised by your mentor. And so what it means to be accountable means that you are a self-regulated professional. If you become registered to practice, you get your CASLPO registration. You can say to the public that you are a speech language pathologist or an audiologist, and the public can recognize you as a regulated professional. And what that means is that you are expected and required to explain your actions and decisions. So your mentor is not responsible for that. You are now taking that responsibility. So what does it mean to be a professional? What is professionalism? And to help answer this question, it might help you to think about the people that you've known in your life who you would call professional. Maybe it's your professors or other professionals, healthcare professionals that you know, nurses, doctors, chiropractors, maybe other audiologists or speech language pathologists that you know. And what about them makes you call them professional? Well, professionalism it's an attitude and a personal philosophy to a certain extent. Having the desire to always improve and learn, knowing the limitations of your knowledge and scope of practice, choosing to be a leader rather than always following in those times when you can be a leader, always trying to do your best even when it's hard or it's challenging, always putting your patients first, their needs, and maintaining professional boundaries. So this is all a part of an attitude or a personal philosophy that makes people, that builds professional or contributes to professionalism. But professionalism is also a set of behaviors. So it's about being responsible, reliable, courteous, fair, honest, showing integrity, being respectful, and of course, being accountable, which is what we're talking about. So for example, if you're late arriving to work or you're running very behind in your schedule, it means that you won't blame other people for that or other circumstances, but you'll take responsibility for that and you'll make improvements so that that doesn't continue to happen. So let's have a look at a scenario with Mia. And Mia is an initial registrant speech-language pathologist who works in private practice. And she is told by a senior colleague that consent for assessment doesn't need to be documented in the patient record. But this information is actually incorrect. So her colleague is not giving her correct advice or information. The truth is both consent for assessment and treatment must be documented according to CASLPO practice standards and the law in Ontario. So unfortunately, a complaint is filed to CASLPO that involves Mia. And during the investigation, patient records are reviewed, and it's confirmed that consent for assessment was not documented. So Mia is asked to explain why she didn't document consent, and her explanation is the following. So she says, I was told by a senior colleague that this was okay, so I trusted them and I didn't question it. I didn't want to create tension between me and my employer, and I was new and I didn't realize this was wrong. So the question for you is, do you think Mia's justification for her actions and decisions in this case is reasonable? And we're actually going to ask you this as a polling question. So I'm just going to launch the poll. So you should see the poll on your screen now, and just take a moment to put in your response, and I'll give you a few seconds to do that. Okay, over 50% of you have participated, so I'll close and I'll share those results with you. So as you can see, most of you have said no, Mia's justification is not reasonable. 12% of you have said yes, and 16% are not sure. So let's have a look at the answer. And the answer is no. Mia's justification in this case is not reasonable. Mia is now a self-regulated professional. She's a speech-language pathologist. And even if she is in her mentorship, it is her responsibility to make sure she understands the expectations for her practice in Ontario. So this comes back to what we've been talking about. What does it mean to be accountable? It means that Mia, or you, if you are an initial registrant in mentorship, you will be expected to explain why you make the decisions that you make. And if you have doubts, you can always contact the college. And those doubts are one of the reasons why mentorship is important. Because in mentorship, you will have a mentor who you can talk to about your practice, and mentorship will help you understand the expectations for your practice in Ontario. So going through that mentorship period will be very helpful for you. So we've just talked about how mentorship is not supervision. And what that means is mentors are not supervisors. So what is the mentor's role then? Well, mentors are there to provide guidance and support to help you understand and apply practice standards, improve your competence, apply principles of sound clinical judgment. Mentors are going to observe you in practice and discuss your practice with you and help you think about how you meet practice standards. Mentors are going to assess if you meet the standards during your mentorship, and they will be submitting those reports of your progress to CASLPO. So you might be wondering, what are the practice standards? Well, the broad definition of practice standard or practice standards are that they are the minimum performance expectations of all speech-language pathologists and audiologists practicing in Ontario in all practice settings. So when you start your mentorship and when you log into the MSAT, you will see that those practice standards are all listed there. And those standards are, and we'll have a closer look at some of those standards in a moment, but those standards are really broad principles that every SLP and audiologist needs to follow, must follow in their practice. And then CASLPO also has some area-specific standards. So some examples are, we have a practice standard for assessment of adults and children by speech-language pathologists. And we have practice standards for dysphagia. And for audiologists, we have practice standards for hearing aid services provided by audiologists. So the standards are all of these things put together. So let's have a close look at the practice standards. So in the Mentorship Self-Assessment tool, you'll see that the standards are outlined as categories, and under each category, there are a set of indicators that relate to that category. So you'll see I've listed the categories here on this slide for you. There are 5 of them. So if we start with management practice, there are 8 indicators related to management practice, and one of them is 1.7. I follow health and safety procedures and practices. So during your mentorship, this would be a standard that you would have to meet. So you would think about that, you would explain how you meet that standard, you would maybe upload some evidence to show how you meet that standard. Looking at patient-centered practice, one of the indicators is 3.1. I obtain and document consent for all intervention plans or courses of action and any significant changes thereafter. So this is a practice standard that you're expected to meet. And CASLPO has different documents about consent and documenting consent that you would look at. You would discuss those with your mentor. And then in the MSAT, you would describe how you meet the standard and upload some evidence to show that you meet this standard. So these are the 5 different categories. We also introduced some new practice standards in 2020, and I wanted to make you aware of those. So when you log into the Mentorship Self-Assessment tool, or when you're looking at college CASLPO's documents, you'll see information around these 4 standards that have been introduced in the MSAT. So there's a standard around conflict of interest. There is a standard for clinical reasoning. And in mentorship, you will complete the clinical reasoning tool during the mentorship period as a way of ensuring that you meet this standard. We require you to do the clinical reasoning tool at the midterm evaluation with your mentor. We also have a practice standard around advertising, and we have a practice standard for professionalism. So let's talk about getting started with your mentorship. So after you become an initial registrant, we recommend that you review the mentorship program guidelines and discuss these guidelines with your CASLPO approved mentor. And then you're going to submit a mentorship contract within 30 days of beginning your employment as an SLP or audiologist in Ontario. When I say CASLPO approved mentor, that's because we have criteria for SLPs and audiologists who can be mentors. So there are this set of criteria, and you'll find those criteria in the mentorship program guidelines and in the FAQs on our website. And we also have this document, which I've taken a screenshot of, that has those criteria. Let me show you where you can find mentorship information on the website. So from the main website page, if you click on Applicants, and then that will bring up a box on the left-hand side for mentorship, and you click on that mentorship box, and then it will take you to a web page that has information about mentorship. There's lots of good information on this web page, and if you scroll down on the web page, it will bring you to a chart that has all of those documents available. So you'll find the mentorship program guidelines there, the mentorship contract, and those mentor criteria that I showed you. We also have frequently asked questions on the mentorship webpage. There's quite a few of them, and that's a really good place for you to go if you want to find some quick answers to some mentorship questions that are frequently asked. But all of the information and description of the whole mentorship process is in the mentorship program guidelines document. So some important points to discuss with your mentor about the contract. Firstly, you'll want to discuss your start date for mentorship, and that start date must be on or after your date of initial registration with CASLPO. You'll also want to discuss the process and requirements for mentoring. So you'll want to review the standards and indicators that I showed you so that you know what all of those standards are that you will be reflecting on and that your mentor will be assessing you on. And you'll want to discuss with your mentor also how you will achieve your patient care hours, which is 500, and your mentored guidance hours, which are 48 from your mentor. You'll want to talk to your mentor about where, how, and when you will meet with them and how often. So are you going to meet in person? Are you going to do video calls? Are you going to do phone calls every week? You want to talk about that and establish that. And also talk about how your mentor will evaluate you, methods of evaluation and feedback. So is your mentor going to give you written feedback, in person, speaking to you in person, verbal, video conference, using the MSAT, probably a combination of those things, but you want to discuss that with your mentor. And then in the contract, we also ask you to identify a third party for conflict resolution. So you and your mentor will use the Mentorship Self-Assessment tool during the mentorship period, and the MSAT allows you to do the following. So it lets you assess your own practice based on the standards. Your mentor's assessment of your practice based on the standards happens in the MSAT as well. You have the ability to upload evidence and to have an exchange with your mentor using comment boxes, and I'll show you some screenshots so that'll be more clear. There's a learning goals section in the MSAT where you're going to come up with 3 learning goals and complete those learning goals in the MSAT. And then the mentors are submitting the midterm and final evaluation reports to CASLPO using the MSAT. You and your mentor gain access to the MSAT when your mentorship contract is approved. So you will receive an email from CASLPO when your contract is approved, and the email contains instructions for how to log in. And the instructions on how to complete the MSAT are within the MSAT itself and also in the mentorship program guidelines. So going back to the website, I'd like to show you where you find information about the Mentorship Self-Assessment tool. So from the mentorship page, there's another box right below for the MSAT, and if you click on that box, it takes you to another page that has information about the MSAT. You can also access the MSAT from this page, and you'll see there are FAQs including when do I gain access to the MSAT and how do I log into the MSAT. So let's take a closer look at the Mentorship Self-Assessment tool. So here are some screenshots so that you have an idea of what to expect when you log into the tool. So on the left-hand side, you'll see that there are 4 sections of the MSAT that you are completing over the 6-month period. Professional practice standards, midterm report, and the due date for the report is listed, the learning goals section, and the final report with the due date listed. In the middle, there's a chart that shows you when you should be working on each of those sections. So you'll see the professional standards, you're working on those all through the 6 months. The midterm report you do halfway through. The learning goals we ask you to do in the second half, so from month 4 to month 6, and the final report is submitted at the end. There are guidance documents available. There's also a mentee resources area here, and if you click there, you'll find lots more guidance documents for you as a mentee. It's another screenshot of the professional practice standards and indicators section, and on the left-hand side in the menu there, you'll see that your information as a mentee will be listed and your mentor's information, and the start date for your mentorship and the end date. And at the top of each section of the MSAT, there are instructions for how to complete that particular section. This is looking again, or a little bit more at the professional practice standards and indicators section. So you can see here, this is the category. We're in management practices, and this is the practice standard, 1.2. I maintain records which accurately reflect the services provided. So below there, you'll see examples of how you would meet this standard. And in this column in yellow, that's for the mentee, so that would be you, and that's where you would rate yourself on the standard. So you would either rate yourself as I meet the standard, I need work to meet the standard, or not applicable. And in the comments box, that's where you would put an explanation of how you've met the standard or what you've done to learn about this standard and make sure that you meet it. And then you can also upload evidence to show that you've met the standard. And when the mentor logs in, they will be able to see what you have written as your comment and your rating and what you've put in as your evidence. And then the mentor will be able to rate you on the practice standard and put in their own comments. So they might say, great job, or they might respond to a comment that you've put in, or they might say, let's have a look at a document, or let's discuss this more. So let's quickly review over the course of your mentorship what you will be doing as an initial registrant or mentee. So you will be assessing your own practice and reflecting on how you are meeting practice standards. You will be providing comments and evidence to demonstrate that you're meeting practice standards. You'll be completing the clinical reasoning tool at the midterm. You'll be setting 3 learning goals and working towards achieving those learning goals. You will discuss your assessment, evidence, and learning goals with your mentor at your midterm and final evaluation meetings. And you're also going to prepare 5 charts for your mentor to review at the midterm and final evaluation meetings. So your mentor has to review a total of 10 charts over the 6-month mentorship period. And let's just review what your mentor will be doing. So your mentor will be providing general guidance on professional practice and providing guidance on the standards and how to apply them in your practice. At the midterm and final evaluation meetings, a mentor will review your assessment, evidence, comments, and learning goals in the MSAT, review 5 patient records to confirm that record-keeping standards are met. Your mentor will be assessing and confirming that you are meeting the college's practice standards. They will indicate that in the MSAT, and they'll be submitting reports to CASLPO by the due date. And then this last one is quite important. Your mentor will recommend you, based on the mentorship period, for a general certificate of registration. So based on their observation of your practice, their discussions with you, your evidence, how you show that you meet the standards, your mentor will make that recommendation to CASLPO that you should go become a general registrant of CASLPO. So what happens after the mentorship period is completed? Well, what will happen is a general certificate will be issued to you, but it'll be issued to you when you have completed these things. So you have to successfully complete the mentorship. You also have to successfully complete the Canadian Entry to Practice exam. And if applicable, you have to fulfill any outstanding orders issued by any committee. To maintain your general registration, you also have to provide 750 hours of patient care or related work in audiology or speech-language pathology during every 3-year period. And that first 3-year period begins on the day that you're issued your general certificate. And also to maintain your general CASLPO registration, you will need to meet the requirements of the Quality Assurance Program on an annual basis. And those requirements include filling out an online self-assessment tool, having 3 learning goals for your practice every year, and then engaging in some continuous learning. It could be a course you take, it could be a book chapter you read, or a research article, or maybe a discussion group that you have with colleagues about a particular professional practice issue. Those could all be counted towards continuous learning activity credits. That's what we call continuing education, or CLACs. And those would be related to the learning goals that you set for yourself every year. And then as a general registrant, you may possibly be selected for a peer assessment. So as you can see, when you're a general registrant, the things that you have to do, quite similar to mentorship. So by going through mentorship, you will be prepared for all of that. Okay, so we've come to a set of frequently asked questions about mentorship, and we have 5 of them. So let's start with this number 1, true or false? I'll have 2 jobs during my mentorship. Therefore, I need to have 2 mentors, 1 for each employment setting. So is this question true or false? And the answer is, it is false. So CASLPO requires 1 designated mentor for your primary employment setting, and that's where you will work most of the time. We can only allow 1 mentor because there has to be 1 mentor who takes responsibility to fill out the MSAT and submit those reports to the college. So if you have other jobs, your mentor is mentoring you for all of the work that you're doing at those other jobs as well. So your mentor must be aware of other employment you have and the type of work you're doing there. You need to document your patient care hours at other employment settings to count those hours towards the 500 patient care hours that you need to complete for your mentorship period. And your mentor can contact colleagues you work with in those other employment settings to confirm details about your practice in that other setting. So let's look at the next question. True or false? Most employers that hire new SLPs and audiologists know about CASLPO's mentorship program and its requirements. And the answer to this question is false. So there are some employers that will know about CASLPO's mentorship, but not all of them will, and you can't really assume that they know about it. So ensure that your potential employer understands that it is mandatory for you to complete a 6-month mentorship period and what that involves. And the website and the documents are there to help you. So you should share those documents with your mentor and your employer, and of course, review them and read them yourself. Next question, true or false? If I can't find a mentor, the college will find one for me. And the answer to this is false. So we can't find a mentor for you, but we can assist by providing a list of registrants to contact. So these would be general registrants who have agreed to be contacted for mentoring, but then you have to get in touch with them, contact them to discuss whether they can mentor you. And if your mentor is going to be external to your employer, so you need to contact because your employer can't provide you with a mentor, so you're having to go outside of your employer, then you need to discuss the requirements of the mentorship with your employer to ensure that this arrangement will work. Because as I said, your mentor needs to observe you practicing, they need to review your patient records, and they need to have regular contact with you. So if it's going to be an external person, then you need to make sure that your employer understands this and that that arrangement can be made. We do allow that. It's okay for that to be arranged, but you need to discuss it with your employer. Okay, next question. True or false? My mentor at my primary employment setting doesn't have school board experience, and that will be my other part-time job during my mentorship. Since my mentor doesn't have this type of work experience, she can't mentor me for the work that I do in the school board. So this is false. It is preferable for a mentor to have experience in the area you're working in, but mentors are not required to have experience in every area of practice that you may work in. Your mentor can still evaluate if you meet standards, because the standards, as I explained before, are principles that apply across all practice settings. If your mentor really feels that they're not familiar with another practice area, then what we do allow is something called collaborators. So your mentor can collaborate with a speech language pathologist or audiologist in that other setting where you're working and doing that other type of work to provide some of your mentorship guidance. So information on collaborators is in the mentorship program guidelines. And if you have questions about this, you can always contact me. Okay, one more question, true or false? I'm allowed to change mentors in the middle of my mentorship period. For example, if I change my employment or my mentor goes on leave. And this is true. So it is possible to change mentors during your mentorship. You do have to submit a new contract. We may require a written statement from your first mentor, depending on how far you are in the mentorship period. And we would advise that you contact us as soon as you realize this will happen, so that we can assist with this transition. So those are all the frequently asked questions. Now we have some time for any other questions that people may have.
All right, so I do have a couple of mentorship questions I'd like to start with. One question was, what is the best way to find a mentor?
Yeah, so there's different ways that people go about finding a mentor. I think the best way is when